All right, today is going to be one of the most fun days of my life. I'm telling you right now, at least my radio life. No, my life is not that sad, fellas. Don't think of me like that. We have Tony Meola, Tab Ramos, and Johnny Harkes, three of my favorite people on earth, and they happen to be from New Jersey. They're all from Kearney, New Jersey, which is the theme of the movie Soccer Town, USA. We're now going to hear from our boys. How you doing today, fellas?
Good, Charlie. Good, fellas.
Tony, let's start with you. Tony, you were a high school legend. Baseball, drafted by the Yankees, soccer, you name it. You had it all going. What were you doing before the 1990 World Cup? How were you getting ready for it?
I was confused, obviously, at that point. I was still confused. Yeah, before 1990, I was probably one of the lucky ones because it was easy for me to find training because I was at the University of Virginia at the time and playing under Bruce Arena. A lot of guys, and not John and Tab included, but a lot of guys in that group, trying to qualify, were finding it really hard to find places to train. That the landscape was completely different. So I was one of I considered myself one of the lucky ones in regards to I had a place to train every day. And it was at that time and still today one of the best college soccer programs in the country. And it just – the World Cup, Charlie, was more or less a pipe dream. We hadn't been there for 40 years. And, of course, we all wanted to go. And I had followed in 1986 when – we lost to Costa Rica, and it was a dream to go, but had no idea that somewhere right around the corner there was a World Cup to be played in.
Tony, globally, there were goalkeeper coaches for the previous 10 years. All the goalkeepers who went to the World Cup would have had personal coaching. How much did you have?
Yeah, I had one at the University of Virginia, Mark Newman, who was there for a while. I actually wrote a pretty cool book on goalkeepers in that era. And I was lucky enough to be part of that book. And then I had Joe Macknick, who later on, probably the new generation knows Joe as Dr. Joe on Fox Sports, the rules analyst and the referee analyst. But he was a goalkeeper
Joe,
coach.
it's a very serious title.
Yeah, it really is. And he actually is a doctor, too. So it's,
PhD, a PhD. He's a doctor.
Right. I was lucky, Neil. I was lucky because, it's one of the things I sought out. It was an important thing when I went to college was, as silly as this sounds, to ask, do you have a goalkeeper coach? That back then, you're talking about 1987 when I was going through the process. And University of Virginia was, again, one of the higher profile programs with more money. So I was lucky, again, in that regard, but it kind of just all lined up for me.
And Tab, you had a taste of pro soccer already.
Very briefly, if you want to call it pro soccer, really, it was what was for dinner, really, here, right? So I was playing, and I think it was called the ASL at the time. I think around that time, I played for the New Jersey Eagles for a little bit, and I played for the Miami Sharks. I had just finished college at North Carolina State. I guess you could call it pro for that time.
I played in the ASL, New York United, so I want to pretend that it was pro soccer. Okay. Okay. And you, Johnny, what were you up to?
I was similar to Tab. I was due to graduate that next year in '89 after we came back from the Olympics in '88 in South Korea. And that was the transition period where the national team, the federation itself, were saying, can we get the guys together full time on contracts? And in the off time, when we weren't training down in Florida or a specific training camp, we ended up, I was playing for the Albany Capitals. Basically the challenge was to fly up to New Albany, on a Thursday, train with the team on a Friday and play a game on a Saturday, and then fly back. And so, I think it was, we were always looking to see how many real game situations we could get in, not just training sessions, but real game situations. So, yeah, we consider it pro for that specific level, what we had in our country at that time. And we respect it for what it was. But I don't know how much, that really helped us prepare in qualifying for the World Cup. But it certainly had to have some type of impact on us, you know, in terms of what we wanted to do and how much we wanted to chase our dreams to get to the 90 World Cup.
Sure. I mean, the desire to fight all the headstrong winds coming right at you lads at that time, where it was basically finding these games out of fresh air on a professional level. I mean, that's got to make your personality develop and your desire. And one of the things I thought it was always memorable about that national team that you all got in was that was a big dimension of it all.
Yeah, I think it made us hungry, you know,
Yeah.
sure, for more and what else was out there.
Right.
And then to some extent, it pushed us beyond, you know, not just a short little dream, a vision. Can we get into the World Cup? It was just like, can we be top pros? You know, where would that be? And because of the lack of consistency, right, like you talked about, can we find a game anywhere? And that's kind of how we grew up in Kearney, and just finding a game every day on the streets, you know, on the courts and everything about
Unbelievable.
Sound USA.
Yeah.
I think that propelled us on to new heights and new challenges across, and our new adventures as we luckily came together. I think you know, growing up with Tab and Tony and Kearney, the one thing that I think we were never short of was competitive nature.
Right.
So we pushed each other, and in some days we were always like best of friends, but there was some days we would push each other to demand more of each other. And I think, you know, I can't speak to Tab or Tony now, but I think that carries with me in terms of a coaching aspect. You know, you want to be there for the players, but you're not their best friend. You need to push them and take them out of comfort zones and see what they're all about. And I try to apply that today.
But as you left your hometown, how much did you stay in touch? I mean, it's crazy that three guys from this tiny town end up playing for the national team. How much did you stay in touch, and how much did you feel that bond? How much did you stick together as a trio in the national group?
I would think quite a bit, because, you know, keep in mind, Neil, after we qualified, right? So we had the 6 months leading up to the World Cup, and then we all went to another World Cup after that together. And, you know, John and Tab I had gone over to England for a little bit, then came back to the U.S. to play in this national team setup, which was very, very unique. John and Tab were both playing overseas at that time. But, you know, we always got together with the national team, and you know, so at least for that period of time, we were pretty much in contact. At least we spent an awful lot of time with the national team, it seemed like back then.
You were playing 30 games a year, weren't you? I think.
Yeah, before, more or less. There were a lot of, because they put this system in place. And Neil, this is well, it's foreign to everybody right now. This would never happen again. But back then, if you think about 1991, 92, when they put the program together, we basically had 30 or 40 games a year, but we were playing everybody, and it wasn't all national teams. We you know, pretty much Charlie's ICC tournament was happening 1992. It was Bayern Munich. It was Juventus we played. It was Corinthians we played when they were really good. It was Sao Paulo with all their great teams. And then, of course, we played national team games. So that was the way we kind of made up a schedule for a group of players, that instead of going, the idea behind it was, instead of going overseas, and in my case, you know, I was constantly fighting for my work permit, they brought guys together and basically guaranteed you games, right? You were going to be the guys who played, and they didn't want us to lose those years, and that's how it was sold to us. But you know, I go to 1990, and I'm sure that, you know, John and Tab are the guys that had to run around and do all the chasing, but I mean, you look at that Italian team and you compare it to what we had, like Walter Zenga, you know, you're talking about Baresi and Bergamo, and forget it, Ancelotti was on that team. I mean, Giannini, the list, and Charlie's smiling. He's not smiling, he's laughing at us right now.
No, I was more laughing at the haircuts.
Tony, were you on the same pay scale as those guys as well?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I want to hear from Tab about something.
But hold on, Charlie. I mean, I'm just asking. I'd like to know. You know, the incentive wasn't to do with money with this situation, right?
Well, I could tell you what the deal was. The deal was that with U.S. Soccer,
you got paid.
they grouped you in 4 groups.
$5.
You either got, when we moved to Mission Viejo, they grouped you in 4 groups, and it all included an apartment. And you either made 100,000, 75,000, or 50,000. That was
Okay.
the deal. It was pretty simple. There were no bones about it. Tab and John were in Europe already, but that was the deal. It was take it or leave it.
Yeah.
Tab,
So
I
you were
want to
making more than me in my first year in England.
I'm sure. Tab, I want to ask you, you know, obviously Tony and Johnny and myself, we grew up in, born, if you will, in New Jersey and grew up in New Jersey, but you came from a soccer rich country, and very few countries in the world really know the importance of the World Cup like Uruguay. You know, how was your sense, like when you got into the World Cup, were you saying to the guys, like, guys, you know, we're in the World Cup for Christ's sakes? I'm mute.
Tab, you have to unmute your
You're
phone.
mute. Yeah. Go ahead.
All right. So maybe it was a little different, but you know, Kearney was a soccer crazy place, and everyone had some sort of background where, you know, they felt soccer was an important part of their life, and the World Cup was this huge event. So I think everybody felt it. In my case in particular, I come from a country that's obviously, it's a very small country, but if you think about the history of the World Cup, and you think about the fact that, you know, Uruguay was in 1924 and 1928 Olympic champion, and then the first World Cup was created, and not many countries went, obviously, but they won 1930. They did not participate in 1934 or 38. Then there was the Second World War, so they, you know, obviously there's nothing going on. 1950 is the next World Cup. Uruguay wins it again. So between 1920 and 1954, Uruguay like wins everything in the world. So
true.
now I come from a background where like my grandfather, my father thought Uruguay is the best in the world. Like that's because it's you know, it's decades of thinking you're the best in the world. It doesn't matter how big the other countries are. So then I moved to the U.S. and I'm thinking, man, I remember being mad at my dad, thinking, out of all the countries in the world, we got to move to the West. There's no soccer. Like we got to go somewhere else. You know, so that was my thing. And then I was fortunate that I landed in a place like Kearney. You know, Harrison, Kearney, hardworking, soccer crazy. It just fit me. And you know, and yeah, we looked for games. This was what John was talking. John and I would come home from college or from playing somewhere else. We'd come home and we get in a car together and drive to Brooklyn to play for the Brooklyn Italians. So we were like national team players, and we're looking to go make a couple $100 at the Brooklyn Italians. Playing where you can get hit with an umbrella on the side. People are right.
I played for Brooklyn Italians. I would get $25. You guys got $100 for Trenton Italians, $25. You got 100. I think there needs to be there's a scandal here somewhere, Tony, that I'm uncovering right now.
They still owe us the last game, but since we lost, we're not going back for the money.
What was there in Kearney apart from football? Hartsey, what was there in football apart from what was there in Kearney apart from football?
Learning the many languages and dialects of everybody, the backgrounds, how dynamic it was, like Tab referenced. It was a melting pot. And to be fair, Neil, there was just the common language was the ball. I mean, we all played. Everybody played every day. And I think, you know, Tony has referenced this at times. Tab has referenced this at times in other interviews we've done. The ball just connected everybody. And that's what we did every day. And we thought that's how it was in every other town. You know, we just thought this is how we're growing up. Where we were playing on baseball fields and getting kicked off. You know, like Tab said, you know, I would send Tab in first to go get his payment from Brooklyn Italians because he was a tough Uruguayan kid. I'm like, I'm sending Tab in. Tab, go in and see what's happening. If he comes out survives, then I can go in second.
Did he come out with the envelope?
Yeah, he came out. He's like, oh, yeah. And he started running. Start the car.
All right, I want to go to 1990 now. Here you are, Olympic Stadium in Rome. A pretty daunting picture. I was just a fan in the stands, cheering for my Jersey boys. and honestly hoping for a tie, right? Because I grew up like you with Uruguay, me with Italy, and Tony. You know, I'm like, this will be good. We'll get a tie, and this will be great. What was going on in your heads when they were playing the national anthem?
Well, first off, Charlie, I'm glad you skipped over the 5-1 ass kicking that we took in the first game. Let's just get past that one, right?
Scudavi was the guy, right?
Scudavi was, he was the guy for sure. Yeah, for me, look, if I could have chosen two places in the world to play a World Cup because of my heritage, it clearly would have been in the U.S. and in Italy, right? And I look at Italy being sort of the warm-up to get ready. My memory from that night is really, really clear. Has nothing to do with soccer. My grandmother, who I hadn't seen in forever, was blind, and I have a picture of her in the stadium, and she's reaching out with her hand, and my mother's telling me that she's trying to touch me on the field.
Oh my God.
And that's my memory of the game. I know what happened. I know the missed penalty kick, and I know Giannini scored and Vialli missed the penalty kick, and Bruce Murray and Peter Vermes almost beat Zenga, hits him in the ass, the 28 passes we put together in the Olays. But for me, that's my memory of that game. It's non-soccer related. It was a lesson we all learned. I'm glad I did it with these two guys next to me, and all of it for me was geared towards, and we come to find this out later on, that Bob Gansler, when he put that team together, his vision was for 1994. You know, his vision was building 1994, because I think we all knew. I think I don't know if it's in the Soccer Town USA video, or if Tab's told me on different occasions, or he said it in one of these interviews, that he can tell you best. We were like on vacation, like spectators at the World Cup. And I don't remember if that's in the movie or not, but I've heard Tab say this, and it's kind of, thinking back on it, that's what we were. We were lucky to be there. We were thrilled to be there. We deserved to be there. But that particular World Cup, it was more, we were just standing by for a little bit.
Tab, tell us.
Well, what I can say, and I don't want to be repetitive, I know Tony said a lot of the same things I would have said. I think at that time, you know, if we look back, and it's a little bit different now, but Serie A was the NBA. And to be able to play Italy in Rome, I think it doesn't get better than that. If there's a moment where you can think you're dreaming as a child to play one game, that was the place to play it, and that was the moment. So for me, although I played obviously many other games and some important games after that too, I still think that one game in Rome against Italy, for me, is the one game that I'll recall as the best opportunity I've ever had in my life to play a game.
That's great. Johnny, what was your thought? And Johnny, did you get the same haircut? Did you and Tony go together to his dad's shop to get the haircut first, or what'd you do?
Yeah, he put the bowl on my head first, Vincenzo, and then when I reflect back to that game, and it's easy for me because every time is the same. When you asked Charlie, it was the national anthem in that stadium, and all I remember, and this is true, is screaming at the top of my lungs, like, what is going on here? Like, I couldn't hear Tab, couldn't hear Tony, but it was so loud, that atmosphere. And to know the history of the game in Italy and that nation and Europe at that time, it culminated, the stars aligned perfectly for us. Like, regardless of us losing 5-1 against it was Czechoslovakia at the time, Czech Republic now, it didn't matter. The opportunity that we had, and I think that fight that we had as well, that carried us through our whole lives, you know, as young players, was going to help us in that game as well. It really was. And there was a time in that game, guys, that I remember we had 23 consecutive passes without Italy touching the ball. 23 consecutive passes. And I kept thinking to myself, we can do this. There was a chance early on that Tab chipped a great ball, and I ran in and I headed a ball wide of the far post. And I thought, hey, we have a chance here. There was a save that Tony would make coming out of the goal as they try to play in behind to Vialli or something. And I was like, oh, we've got a chance. We always had a belief in ourselves. And that stadium environment was just absolutely incredible. It really was. Did
you three kids from the same town come away from 3 games in the World Cup in which you didn't get a point? Did you come away much better players than you arrived? Tony?
For me, I don't know about a better player, Neil, as much as a clearer understanding of how far we had to go. Right. So now we had a real picture, right? Because seeing it on television is one thing, right? Watching videos is one thing. Living it, breathing it is a completely different story. And for me personally, the just having an idea that, okay, this is Walter Zenga, right? This is what world class goalkeeping looks like. Right, and of course I looked at the goal. The one of the big goalkeepers in that tournament was Pompito, right, from Argentina, and penalty kicks. This is what a goalkeeper has to do to help your team be successful. So it was just an eye-opening experience because remember, 6 months prior to that, I was trying to win a national championship in college soccer in the U.S. Right, just 6 months before that. So that's really what I took out of it.
Tony, let me ask you, just on top of that, you know, that was from the personal perspective. What did you feel in your hearts of hearts? And you can answer this if you want, Tab, but on a national level, like when you just said, this is how far I have to go to get to the likes of these other great goalkeepers on the world standing. But what about the shape of US football at that time? How did you feel about that?
Yeah, again, personally for me, Ray, the lesson, when I got to 1994, by the time I was 4 years down the road, there wasn't a goalkeeper in the World Cup that I said, he does something that I can't do. Right? But I said that in 1990. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to play well all the time or you're going to make every save. Or I just looked around and said, there's nothing that they can't do. And from that perspective, I think all of us grew that way. Right? We all grew that way. And you know, I'm sure if you ask every guy in that team that played in 1990 compared to 1994, they all thought they learned something in 90 and they used it somehow to get better in 1994. And I saw it live, and I think you guys probably saw it as well. That was a pretty decent team we had in 1994.
Yeah, it was it was more than a pretty decent team. Go ahead, Johnny.
No, I was just going to say, I from that experience for me is I grew a lot of respect for the international game. I think I got, you know, that was me just learning. I was still learning as a young player and understanding what it meant to play as a pro in Italy, what it meant to play in the World Cup. And we were very fortunate to get there, you know. And from that experience, I thought I had so much more of a respect for the game. And I wanted it even more after that World Cup. I really did. It didn't matter if we didn't get a point or not. It was just the experience itself taught me a lot about who I was and what I was going to try to do in my life. And I think seeing that, it was like, wow, could this even be possible at all in any level? And I think that was kind of a platform that gave us some exposure.
You think that ran through the team, John? You think your teammates, your squad felt that inside of them as well? I know that you've felt it in a very pointed way, but did you get that sense that they all realized this is, you know, the world stage, this is where we're going and to go forward?
Yeah, I don't know, Ray. To be honest with you, I don't know if everybody felt that way. I mean, there was players on that team, I think, that maybe stopped playing soccer the year after.
Right.
You know what I mean? Neil Cavone, I think he retired after that World Cup, and he was on our squad. And I don't know. I mean, all I can speak to is that, you know, the conversations I've had with Tony and Tab and some of the other guys close to on that team is it propelled some of us and it made us hungrier. I don't know if that was a full squad thing. You know, it's you got to spend a lot more time together as a group, I think, to figure that out, you know, with each other.
And how much had you matured? I'll start with Tab. Tab, how much you felt you matured and how much you felt the team matured in 94?
In 19 or between 90 and 94?
Yes.
I think, I think a lot. We were a different team. I think, you know, if you look, starting with the 1990, you know, I believe that, you know, after the Czech game, we became men. You know, really, it's what happened. You know, we went as tourists. After one game, all of a sudden, it's like, whoa, you know, this is different. You know, to go back a little bit on the last question, and I'm sorry about that, but I have to say, I felt after the 1990 World Cup, I felt like, you know, certainly like John and I could play on any team. yeah, they were good. Europeans were good. It's a different level, but I felt like we could play in any team. And I felt like Tony was likely the most ready to jump in a goal in any league in the world.
I agree with that completely.
So I didn't feel like we were, as a team, we were far behind, but I think as individuals, I think speaking really from the three of us, I felt like we could go play anywhere. So it wasn't now, to answer that question too, I didn't feel the team all felt the same. Some of the team maybe felt like, hey, I made it far enough. Okay. That's good.
Yeah.
Not us. I don't think we felt that way at all. It's like, what's next? So that's that part of it. And then 94 was different. 94 now, a bunch of us had been playing in Europe now for a few years. We had that experience of being on the starting 11 every week, which is difficult because we come from a country where you get a trophy every time you score 3 goals. So, and you get over there and it's, what have you done for me lately every single week? And we learned a lot. And then the addition of guys like Thomas Dooley, who had a lot of experience overseas, Roy Wegerle and on and on, Hugo Perez, who had so 1994 was different. We were a professional team in 1994. We were an amateur team in 1990.
I'm going to keep that theme going. You're in the game. You're playing Brazil. Obviously, Tab, you had that terrible elbow to the face. Let's start with before Tab got hurt. Johnny and Tony, well, I'll start with Tab since we're talking about you, the one that got hurt. Before you got hurt, going into that game and that game before you got hit, I know you don't remember much after that, but before you got hit, did you feel like we're being competitive here? We could take these guys on.
Hang on, can we just explain? We're in the 1994 World Cup, through the group stage and in the knockouts against Brazil.
Correct. Thank you so much, Neil. We're playing Brazil now. Skipped over Colombia. I shouldn't have skipped over Colombia, right, fellas? We want that glory. I think you deserve it. I think you deserve it. All right, let's go back to Colombia first before we answer that. Okay, you're playing Colombia. They're picked as one of the favorites to win the World Cup. Pelé famously says they're going to win the World Cup, and here they have all these guys: Asprilla, Rincon, Valderrama, household names for pretty much everyone who knows international soccer, and you're playing Colombia. Tab, you first.
Me first? Okay,
Yeah.
Well, I'll go back to the line in the documentary where Tommy McEwen says, hey, you know what? We're playing Colombia, but we got 3 guys from our hometown. We can beat these guys. We feel the same. I don't think there's been a game we've ever been scared, that's for sure. So, I mean, what do we have to lose, man? Let's go out there and do this. And I think that's kind of how we felt, and I think we played a great game, by the way. It's not like it was so, yeah, I mean, that's how I felt about it. Yeah, it was difficult. It's a lot of pressure. There's 100,000 people at the Rose Bowl against one of the favorites to win the World Cup. But it's us, man. It wasn't easy to get to the playground and win your games. So we're going. And we have the referee protecting us, by the way.
Johnny, how important was it growing up in Jersey, in Kearney in particular,
I think it was
Columbia?
I think it was super important. I think it lends itself to all of the bits of, we talk about key qualities in players that you guys comment on and you watch and you see across the world. And it gave us key ingredients to fight against anybody and to have this self-belief. There was a confidence about us. And like Tab said, even and I remember, some of the best things about, football, we talk about the passion of the game and everything, but when you're in that tunnel and that gladiator shot and you're standing there next to the other team, you could look at the faces and you can kind of get a feeling of like how we're going to do today. And you could look at Colombia and you could see Lionel Alvarez and Pibe and them. They looked, there was some unbelievable concentration and focus on their face, but they also looked like they were under some serious stress. Pressure. Unbelievable stress. Now, we didn't know exactly what they were going through at that time. Obviously, we're young players and we're like, let's just get out and kick the shit out of this team. That's how we felt. We want to play. We want to compete. We can beat anybody. That's how we felt. And I think it lends itself to getting an education in the game and growing up with this gritty type of desire coming from Kearney, New Jersey. I think that really helped us.
Sorry, Johnny. Keep in mind, you guys were in Europe at the time and playing. I don't know how many of the Colombia games you came back to, but the 2 years leading up to that, we played Colombia 4 or 5 times, and I can remember. I think we lost each game by a goal. It was 1-0, 1-0, 2-1. We lost in penalty kicks in a tournament to Colombia.
Yeah.
And that was the streak of Colombia when they had won I don't know, some crazy number of games in the row. We were kind of their bogey team.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was one of those things like, I think they looked at us like, eventually this U.S. team is going to beat us. We just hope it's not today, you know, at the World Cup, you know, and that's how it turned out. And if you remember the game, we survived the first 5 minutes. We were getting pummeled the first 5 minutes. Then that save off the line between Clavijo and Balboa, and Clavijo and Sorber, and then it hits the post and goes out, and you thought at that moment, you're like, oh man, we're in trouble. And then we completely took over the game. And again, we get a fortunate goal, I understand, but I think it was coming. It was one of those, you know, you look at it was coming, and then you go back the last 25 years, you find me a better pass for a goal in U.S. soccer history than the one Tab Ramos plays to Ernie Stewart. You go watch that goal from every single angle, and I buy you dinner, Charlie, if you find me a better pass in the history of our game.
Why don't you just buy me dinner anyway?
You know I know I always have to anyway, so I may as well throw it out there.
You know how many restaurants Charlie knows that are really high-paying restaurants?
Yeah.
He's taking you to a...
But I'm serious. You go find Ray. I know you love a good pass. You love yourself a good pass. You go find a better pass than that has ever been played in a U.S. jersey.
Yeah, the artisan pass. Let me ask you, Tony, the captain, as you were going into that game and through the tournament, did you feel any extra pressure on you to be the galvanizer, or was that just a part of the team, the personality that you had a lot of leaders on that team with that sort of grit and that character and that drive? But as a captain, what extra did you do?
I think Bora made this really clear to me. I wasn't the leader of that team. I was the one guy, Ray, when we moved to Mission Viejo, that had a connection to all of the guys that were constantly coming back from Europe to play in the national team. And he thought I was the only guy in that group that could marry those two groups together when they finally got together. Right. So we were living in Mission Viejo playing 30, 40 games a year. And then all of a sudden, these guys from Europe who I was all friends with had played in 1990 with. Some of the guys in Mission Viejo were new. And he said, that's your role. He said, make sure everybody's happy when these two groups of players get together. And that was the reason for me. I was the captain. I think still to this day, I mean, just think about it. I was 25 years old as the captain of the World Cup in my country. You know, and it should have been in the real world. If we're playing in the real world, it's Tab or John or some other guy, maybe Fernando Clavijo at his age, you know, at that time. It could have been anybody, but that's the reason I was the captain of that team. That was my mission.
But you carried it well, Tony. And that flag was, you know, I guess you got to be pissed off at Brandy Chastain, because if it wasn't for her taking her shirt off, yours would have been the most iconic moment ever in U.S. soccer history, probably, with the flag around your shoulders walking around the field.
Yeah, I actually looked. I thought I had this picture here, but that's the one when John's on my back and we've got the flag. That's a pretty cool picture.
That's a pretty cool picture. Let's now switch over. Now you get through the first round. You got to play Brazil. Obviously, this is Brazil. And as Tab is saying, in those days, in 1990, 1994, I mean, you can't really get bigger than Italy or Brazil in those days. And Tab, going into the game, you got through the group. How'd you feel? Did you feel it was money in the bank, or you felt like, no, we got to go further?
Well, I mean, this was definitely a difficult matchup. You know, there was no secret, because that Brazil team was a little bit different than previous Brazil teams. You know, I think they had Dunga and Mauro Silva in the middle of the field, and you know, so they had a good balance with, you know, obviously having Bebeto and Romario up top, and having these two guys behind them. I mean, it was just a well balanced team all around. They had everything. But you know how Bora played the games. Bora wanted to be conservative. He wanted us to counter. And we had strong central defenders. We were strong in the center of the field with Dooley and Lalas and Marcelo, and we were a tough out. And at the same time, we had some talent going forward. I think Hugo started that game. I think because John had gotten too many cards, so he wasn't playing that game. So we also had guys that could do some damage going forward. So, yeah, of course, the idea was to win the game. Of course, you want to win the game, but that was definitely going to be a difficult one for us. And I thought we started the game fairly well, and we had a good first half. And then, yeah, of course, I don't remember anything else after that.
How about you, Tony? Anything you want to add about that matchup?
Yeah, I couldn't sleep. There, Bebeto, Romario were on my mind the 3 nights before. But look, we needed 2 players more than ever in that game. And as Tab said, John was suspended because of a yellow card he got that could have gone to anyone really at that point against Romania the game before. Was suspended that game, and our one creative guy in Tab obviously got the injury, and Hugo Perez came in. But if you remember, we had an opportunity to be up maybe 2-0 in that game in the first 10 minutes against Brazil, and then of course they took over after that a little bit. But we had chances, and I go back to what John said. But the one thing I will always remember is we were not scared to play Brazil on that day. I don't think we felt we were. Yeah, were they essentially a better team than us? Yeah, but on the day could we've had an opportunity to beat them? Yeah, I go back to the Colombia game that gave us, and I go back 2 years before when, and I know this will surprise people. I still go back to one game we played that really for me changed that team, and that was against Ireland in Washington D.C. Go again. Challenge Bruce Murray, our old teammate,
U.S. Cup '92.
U.S. Cup '92. Okay, Bruce Murray sent me a video of that game about 4 months ago, and I watched that game. And I when you watch the highlights of that game, Tab scores an unbelievable goal. John, I think you got the third one right. Dooley flicked it to you,
Yep.
but that team was really, really good. That's an Ireland team that, if you remember, hadn't lost in like 30 games or something like that.
Yeah.
They were on a tear, that Irish team. That I know we probably won't say that for a long time again about Irish sides, the way it's going, but that was a good team we beat. And I thought at that time, there's not a lot of teams that we should fear in the World Cup, and on our day, we could give it a run.
And
And
to
there's
also
also
now
Portugal
me
and
from a
Italy in
different-
that.
My
Go ahead,
different
Johnny.
perspective and a different lens. I'll give you my take on that game in Brazil because I was suspended for that game. So very disappointed from a personal standpoint because I would have loved to play in that next round, obviously, and play with the guys on the pitch. But I can tell you, though, from being in the dressing room, the confidence was there. You could see it in our guys. We were looking like we were coming out to play against, it didn't matter, whatever team it was. But it just happened to be July 4th, Independence Day, in California, in the big stage, and it was against Brazil. And we were at times the better team. From sitting there and watching our guys, I couldn't be more proud the way that Tony and Tab approached that game because it was a makeshift team. And, you know, I think, Tab, you remember, right? Kobe played from a start. That was Kobe Jones' first start for us as a young player. And we were getting after him at times, you know, and like Tony mentioned before, yeah, they had a threat, and Tab mentioned it as well, and Bebeto and Romario and some of the top players in the world were there. And it was devastating for me as a friend of Tab's to see Tab get hit like that. It was devastating because people didn't know what to do. And I was on the bench. I was able to sit in the bench. I don't know why I was able to sit down there. I probably shouldn't have been. But I was able to sit down there. And from that perspective, on a field level, and our medical team and the coaching staff, nobody knew what to do. And everyone was yelling, get around there, get your asses around there, get over and see Tab, because he wasn't moving. And I'm sorry, Tab, I don't want to bring that up to make you feel like you're in a dark place or anything. And I know that you've moved on from that. But it was the scariest shit feeling that I had as a friend to look at that. And that was disgusting to me, what happened. And I know that Leonardo didn't mean to do it. And Tab's explained it many times, and they're good friends now in the hospital. That was devastating. And losing the game 1-0, the way we lost it and the way that we played, I couldn't have been more proud of our team at that point. And I think going back to the other perspective was we loved playing against the big giants, you know, that's who we were, you know, and I think maybe that's changed today. And you look at the demographics of how we are, we're not so much the underdog anymore. And we loved being the underdog and upsetting the big giants in the world. That's what we grew up doing.
You all came from this small town where you said you had to keep looking for a game. Now you were playing in a World Cup in your own country where all the stadia were full. The whole country was behind you. You must have felt, as three young men, we're changing our world.
Yeah, it's a tough one, Neil, because I think when you play, looking back on it now, I realize the magnitude of the game. But when you're playing, you're only worried about playing and winning, right? Because I think I think we all kind of understood, Neil. We maybe unlike some other countries, and clearly we see a lot of this now. We had a responsibility that was twofold. One was to play and try and compete because that's what you do, and the other one was to grow the game in the U.S. Right? That was a major responsibility of that particular group. Was there some weight? I think the weight maybe came in '94 because no home team had ever not qualified for the second round, and believe me, we spoke about that, right? we didn't want to be the first. We wanted to be the first in other areas, but probably not that one. But I think now I look back on it and realize how important Trinidad game was, how important making it to a first World Cup was in that long, how important competing against Italy in '90, as Tab said, in that one, and how important Colombia was. They seem, I don't know the right words. They seem more important in the history of the game now than they did when we were going through it. At least that's how I feel. Because when you're playing, the mission is 90 minutes, right? It doesn't matter what league you're playing in. That's really what you think about. But I agree that it was really important in our history.
Did you sense as well, Tony, from the media attention and the fans, the fan base? This was the World Cup that had all of my next door neighbours in my little area in Fort Lauderdale that didn't know anything about the game, but this was the one that really enchanted them and beguiled them. And it really, you guys brought that attention even more so because it was in the homeland. Did you get the sense from the media attention?
Yeah, well, we hadn't been exposed to that before, Ray. And I was in an Uber just before this pandemic in LA, and a guy recognized my name on the, they get the readout, and he rattled off everyone basically from that '94 team, from Tab to John to Alexi to, Kobe Jones. And he rattled off everybody. I really think that moment, if I had a nickel for every time someone said, oh, '94 is when I got turned on to the World Cup, right, I probably wouldn't be working on Sirius XM every night for 3 hours.
Not for what they're paying you, Tony. That's for sure.
I said it jokingly, but
of course we are.
I'm sure John and
Joe,
Tab
we're all
have heard
joking. Joe, we're joking. I do want to say this. I think that you three, and I put Peter in there too, that Peter Vermees, and I've said this all the time, there's been seminal moments in this country, and you guys were responsible for this '94 World Cup, because I think, I was a part of it on the other coast, right, in New Jersey, and it was really, we were focusing on our little world over there, and it was Italy and Ireland and Mexico and, the Norway and all these guys there. And it was like, and US was all the way on the other side, right? And I just look back and I say like that, I was almost the spectator too. I mean, I only saw you guys on TV like everyone else. You know, I wasn't near the stadium where you guys were. And it was strange. But I look back on it now and say, you guys have done more for this game than virtually anybody I could think of. And I mean that with all my heart. I mean, you three guys in particular, and I put Peter Vermees in there, and I'm sad he didn't make it to the 94 World Cup, and he was one of the guys cut at the end, right? But really, I really just want to thank you, because I don't think we'd be here today if it wasn't for you three guys.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Charlie.
you.
I mean that with all my heart. And Tony,
One
you're
of
not
the
still
things-
mad at me, are you?
No, I told you I love you.
Okay, good. I feel bad.
One of the things that
Yeah.
changed out of the World Cup as well was the MLS had to be created and started, and it followed a couple of years later. How big a deal was getting that league started? How good was the start? How much did you enjoy being a part of it? Harkes, start with you.
Yeah, I think it was huge. I think there was a lot of big events that we experienced amongst the three of us. You know, coming from a small town in Kearney, I think we experienced, you know, being in the first World Cup in 40 years. We experienced hosting a World Cup in ourselves, and you know, we were like always on a proving ground, though, Neil. For us, it was always a proving ground, because even after the '94 World Cup, and we felt like, yeah, we did fairly well. We got out of a group. We were under a lot of pressure. Ignorance is bliss. I mean, we didn't think about it then as young players, but we look back on it and we were like, wow, what the heck was going on? We accomplished quite a bit, and we were very fortunate at times to do that. So to get the league was the next step in terms of that building process, because we had a platform. And if we didn't do well in '95 in Copa America, then people would have said it was a one-off. You know, you have to think back in '94 as well. England didn't qualify for the '94 World Cup. So like Ray was mentioning there, it was very key from a demographic standpoint. So many of the melting pot fans that are in our country, the English were kind of joining in with us when we were doing well and hosting in
That's
94.
right. That's true.
That's true. And it was that demographic part of that. And Italy played Brazil in the final, and Baggio missed his penalty. And a lot of people remember back, and didn't matter where you were from in the world, you were in the US and you were proud of your country. So the next step was like, oh, now what? You have to continue to prove yourself again, Neil. And so getting the league in '96 was massive. Getting Tab to sign as the first player was huge, because we were all kind of like, is it going to happen? Why would I leave Europe? It's such an unknown. There's a big, and this is part of, it's different because Ray came over to the NESL in those days, you know, from the UK and from Newcastle and everything, where it was a different landscape back in those days. From our perspective, it was, we want to be part of starting something new. Can that dream happen where we make professional soccer a dream come true for us and next generations, and maybe our kids and the next kids after that? We wanted to make sure we could put it on the map. I think doing so well in '95 in Copa America, one of the few tournaments that we never represented ever before.
We
was a
beat
big
Argentina
decision.
3-0. Harksey, I think you had a good game that day, if I remember correctly.
I think we all had a good game. It was, we were only as good as
Absolutely.
the guy next to us, you know, for sure, Charlie. And I appreciate that, but we all played well. And Argentina, you know, God, I mean, they had some quality players coming off. Batistuta, they called him Batigol. You know, Simeone came on the pitch in the second half, actually. You know,
3-0, Neil.
try to kick
3-0.
the crap out of us. But yeah, I mean, it was always the next challenge for us. And to get the game in our country in MLS, that was huge. That was massive.
Well, I want to say something here that I had the great honor of being the general manager of the Metro Stars. Didn't always go as we'd hoped, but you know, getting Tab as the first pick in the league was truly extraordinary. And you know, we had Tony Meola, Tab Ramos, Roberto Donadoni, and Eddie Fermani. And with the four of you, we had 10,000 season tickets. I mean, that's insane when you think about it. 10,000 paid season tickets. We only had 4 guys on the team. So again, thank you. That was a pretty good move on your parts. How much of a we kept talking about responsibility. How much when you guys stepped on the field in 96 did you feel like, all of you, like, wow, this is another thing that I have to do. I have to carry the water again one more time, because, you know, every time you're doing something really new, and it's never a guarantee it's going to work out. Tab, you first.
See, because I keep getting muted.
Yeah.
I,
It's not me, by the way. We're blaming Pete Corey on this one with the mutes.
it was, you know, it was difficult, Charlie. You know, first, obviously, I appreciated, you know, being able to have the opportunity to play in my hometown in a Giant stadium where, you know, where all three of us wanted to play, really, because you know, we grew up wanting to play there. So it was, you know, but it was a challenge. And you're right, the way you put it when you say, you know, here's another thing that we have to do, you know, like we got to make it happen. And yeah, of course, you know, at the beginning you're like, okay, well, yeah, this league has to happen. So of course we have to come back and we have to sign. You know, my hope was to be at home. So you gave me that opportunity, which was lucky for me. But it was difficult because it was a blend of, you know, players like Donadoni, who was one of the best players in the world at the time. It's not like he was, you know, washed up or, you know.
No. He's 32 years old when he came over, so.
He was one of the best players in the world. And then we had players who were coming out of college, barely making enough money to really call themselves pros. So they kind of all bunched themselves up in an apartment and didn't really care much. And so you had, you know, you had some older players who were like, what is this? And you had younger players who didn't really care that much because it wasn't really the pros. It was like college on steroids,
right. But
now you got some money for beer. And then there were us in the middle. So now all of us, we're coming from pro clubs. We're not the best players in the world. We're good players.
Very good players.
So we're in that middle range where we're like, well, wait, best guys, come on, you know, help us out. And hey, you guys, you know, you help us out too. But they weren't. It was not an easy way to get it started. But I have to say, you know, now I look back at it, of course, you know, there were many things that I would change about my approach to it, especially as it went on, in particular with our team.
Me too, by the way. Me too.
What's that?
I would change a lot of things too. And I don't say that about life that much. I really don't. I'm really a guy that goes forward, but I do feel that it was so strange, that setup, and it was so much responsibility, I think. And there are things that, you know, it's easy with 25 years of hindsight to say like, oh, I would have done this differently, right? I don't pretend like it would have been easy to do, but yeah, I would have done things differently. I'm sure.
The whole league was in a different world back then, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But I've got to ask you, Charlie, was one of your regrets about trading our pal Tony Meola?
No, I think I have like 3 or 4 regrets, right? More than you could know. And there's plenty in between. The 2 worst were Tony and Peter. But it was a strange time, and I don't want to take away from these guys. I go back to what I said. The 3 of these guys have done more for the game than virtually anybody I know in this country. And there's a lot of administrators, I'm not one of them, that sits around and says, oh, pat me on the back, I'm the greatest. But really, we can't forget people. Giorgio used to say this all the time, rest his soul. People don't go to watch the commissioner in his office. They go to the game to watch you guys play. Yeah. And that's something that you've given me great pleasure my whole life. I've been so proud to watch you guys grow up. And you've turned into, at least 2 of you, Tab and Tony, into real gentlemen. Oh, Harkes, I'm sorry, kid. And Harkes too, really. All 3 of you, thank you.
Charlie, I like that.
No problem, Charlie. I mean, if you actually had me in your team in the first year, you would have won a championship.
Hey! That's true. Go ahead, Tab. Tell them. As I was saying, gentlemen, I didn't say about nice guy and all.
Yeah. Are these yours? You left them in the locker room.
Go ahead, Tab. Go ahead.
I was going to finish by saying that at the end of the day, I wouldn't change most of it because that was. It was learning. It was making the better. It helped us to get to where we are today. You know, today I walk on the field here with the Houston Dynamo, and I'm likely one of the least spending clubs in the league, and yet I walk out every day to an amazing facility, beautiful grass. Like it's just amazing that it's come this far. It really is.
Well,
It's
I
amazing,
credit you
Charlie.
guys.
You know, when the English will look back to that World Cup in '66 and think of the West Ham connection of Bobby Moore, Peters, and Jeff Hurst, and rightfully so from that club, but from that town of Carney, for you three lads to come out of that with that fight and desire and lead a country into the 2 World Cups and then to ignite MLS, you should be damn proud.
Yeah.
Thanks,
I'm proud
Ray.
of the boys. Proud of
Thank
the
you,
boys. And remember, Neil and Ray, they're from Jersey. They're not from Newcastle or London, anything like that. Just Jersey. All right. Johnny Harkes, Tony Meola, Tab Ramos. What a pleasure. Thanks, fellas.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Thanks.
lads.